Okay, so for the 1112 Explorer, it's a mirrored instrument on both ends. So they will work on opposite surfaces. If this is going to be towards, then this would be the away. So this is your terminal shank, this last bend here. That is your terminal shank, well, after the last bend anyway. And then this is your tip third. That is the area that you're going to use for your tactile sensitivity. Sometimes it can make a little ting, but you'll mostly be using it for tactile sensitivity. When you feel the roughness of the calculus, you can tell how big the calculus deposit is, how rough it is, if it has a ledge on it, you know, and you'll just mentally keep that in mind, or you can just go tooth by tooth, you know. Okay, so for the 1112 Explorer, the way that you would find the proper working end is you can use the premolar test again, and if the last bend is pointing towards the posterior and you're working on the posteriors, then that is correct. And then you can, once you come this way, then you would, once you got to the premolar on the opposite side of your working, that's when you would flip and come back. But okay, so this is the proper working end because the bend is pointing towards the posterior. We will work on this tooth. It's the easiest, it seems like. Use light pressure. You don't want to be squeezing the instrument because that will defeat the purpose and you won't have any tactile sensitivity. And you will start, of course, at the distal line angle, grasping with your C, making sure that your middle finger is on the shank so that you can feel it. You won't be able to feel it up here. You'll have to lightly hold your finger on the shank, keep your C in your fulcrum. So fulcruming on one tooth away, light pressure, put the tip on the distal line angle, slow walking strokes, a little bit of lateral pressure. I mean, just enough to hold it against the tooth. You don't have to press too hard. Just barely rubbing against the tooth. And then when you come out, you will rotate on the tip of the tip third of the instrument, keeping it adapted to the tooth, and then point the tip towards the mesial. Rotate with your middle, with your index finger and your thumb, holding with your middle finger still. Starting at the distal line angle, you'll just easily use your wrist to come more mesial. Go all the way interproximal, making sure not to stop at the contact. Sometimes it's easy to feel the contact and say, oh, I can't go any further, but make sure you go beneath the contact, under the sulcus, to feel everything under there. Then, of course, you would go to the next tooth, distal line angle, work your way distal, walking strokes, distal line angle, work your way distal, work your way mesial, all the way interproximal. And then you would come all the way across, switch ends, start at tooth 1 or 2 at most posterior, distal line angle, and then come all the way back over. Okay, now for the area-specific curettes, I have the Gracie 1112, which is for mesial surfaces of posteriors. It's not on the focus. Mesial surfaces of posteriors, and then distal surfaces of posteriors are the Gracie 1314. So we'll start with posterior. To find the correct working end, you can look at the premolars, do the premolar test, proper fulcrum, sit at the right clock position, come interproximal. If you are parallel, then that is correct. If I were to try the other end, it would be kind of wrapping around the tooth, which is not what we want. So proper working end. Okay, so we're going to start at the distal line angle of the most posterior tooth, and this is for subgingival, so you can go sub. you're going to insert and do long. Sorry, it's hard for me to get in my position. Let me come up to this tooth. It's more easily accessible from this angle. Okay, so distal line angle, proper fulcrum. You think yourself, I am at 10 or 11 for my away surfaces. My instrument, got the proper instrument. I've got the correct working end, my fulcrum, I've got my mirror. We're ready to go. If I had a light, I would make sure my light was correct for the maxillary arch. Okay, so start the distal line angle. We're going to go slightly beneath the sulcus. Depending on how far your periodontal probe went is how deep you can insert. Make sure that you are fulcruming strongly. Use your wrist motion. Come all the way interproximal. Same thing, you'll come up to the next tooth. Start that distal line angle, keeping the toe third adapted. Come interproximal. Same thing, tip toe third, all the way to the distal. You don't want to go past the distal line angle because when you do the 11-12, you'll come back and start at the distal line angle and overlap. So for the 11-12, same thing, you can do the premolar test. Parallel, that's not parallel, so that would be incorrect. That one is correct. Okay, so again, we'll work with this tooth, it's the easiest. Again, proper clock position, proper lighting, fulcrum, correct end of the instrument. Make sure I'm using my indirect vision, that I'm not trying to look directly. A firm grip on the instrument. You don't have to use a light grip with these like you do with your Explorer, because you do kind of have to put a little bit of elbow grease into it. But I mean, don't do it so hard to where you're hurting your fingers. Okay, so you'll start right here at the distal line angle, but you're going to face the mesial because that's the direction you're going. Proper fulcrum. Keep your C hand position there. Okay, so proper fulcrum, and my box is trying to move, so let me hold on to my box. And then we're just going to work our way mesial, just like so. And if you do come across a calculus deposit and you are wanting to remove it, of course you want to remove it, but what you'll do is you'll just kind of angle the face of the blade towards the tooth, get the blade a little bit beneath the calculus, and use your wrist motion to kind of pop it up. You'll angle it as you're pulling up slightly. So you'll kind of just pop it up like this. You don't just scrape, because that will varnish it. You want to pop it off in bigger chunks. And that's 11-12 and 13-14. Okay, so the 204S, this is the only one we're talking about today that has a tip instead of a toe. It is also used for posterior. These are for, this is for those areas of the tooth that are a little bit harder to reach. As you can see, it has a more prominent bend and the shank is a little bit shorter. So, you can start at the distal line angle again. You'll want to stay super gingival for this one. Start the distal line angle, and of course do your walking strokes. Keep the tip third adapted. Go interproximal. Was that the right working end? Yes, it was. Okay. It is the right working end. This one will also be interproximal, but if you come out here to the buccal surface of the tooth, it's not going to look like it's parallel. Once you wrap around the tooth and go all the way interproximal, it will be more parallel. It'll almost look wrong until you get interproximal, and then you can see that it does become parallel. I second guess myself on it a lot as well. But yes, so you'll start the distal line angle, walking strokes, lateral pressure, use your wrist, go interproximal, and then again you will rotate with the tip on the tooth, rotate and come back across. to the mesial surfaces. And this one does have a cutting blade on both sides, so you have to be careful. Because it does do mesial and distal, you would use this side of the blade to do the distal surfaces. And then once you come around, the other blade on the other side of the instrument gets the mesial probe. Our probe is also on the same handle as the shepherd's hook, but we're just going to talk about the probe. So the probe is a blunt rod. Ours is measured in 3mm increments, if you can see it. So 3, 6, 9, 12. And this is used to measure periodontal pockets, BOP, exudate, the health of a sulcus, of different teeth. It's just to check the depths and the measurements, the attachment loss of the sulcus. So if I were probing quad 3 away surfaces of the posteriors, see, I would of course be sitting at about 10 or 11. And then I would start at that distal line angle, have my fulcrum, a couple of teeth away, using my indirect vision, light pressure, just walking strokes. You want to get all 6 surfaces to measure that. So for instance, this, I don't know if you can tell, would be a, well, that would be a 9. But we're on a top of dot, so I'm pretty sure that was just a pocket of the top of dot, but you would go all the way around. And you'd go to the next. Of course, changing your clock positions as you get to areas where you would need to change. So, these little walking strokes, make sure you go all the way in between the contacts. You want to get every angle on the tooth.